So ontology deals with beings and the to-be-ness of beings. And sometimes we will find that authors will restrict the use of the term metaphysics to concern the realm of beings in this sense. And they will use the word ontology to deal with being in this sense. However, that way of cutting things is not universal at all. And so I will only point out that within analytical philosophy, metaphysics is going to be this way. Within what we might call existential phenomenology, talking about being this way, we're going to use the word ontological. So Heidegger's Sein und Zeit is a ontological investigation. He even goes so far as to say that it is an existential, phenomenological, ontological, hermeneutical investigation. So that's a lot of words that you don't need to worry about today. Okay, ontological questions. There's a number of them, right? Let's look at them. First, what are the things which ultimately are? Well, that's a good question. What is the being of the universe? The to-be-ness of the universe. What is the being of being? Wow. What is the to-be-ness of things that are? Right? What is the to-be-ness of a proposition? Aristotle talked about being in many senses. And, of course, this was worked up later in a book called The Many Senses of Being in Aristotle that the young Heidegger read. And the book, The Many Senses of Being in Aristotle, talks about being in different ways and gets after the ontological question that made Heidegger think the question of being for the rest of his life. What is the being of a proposition? What is the being of things that aren't being? What is the to-be-ness of a unicorn that is not? Now, of course, contemporary analytical philosophers, some will just say that I'm talking mere confusions here, right? But, I mean, we have to kind of look back on the history of philosophy and kind of say, I think, well, you know, these aren't stupid guys. Most of these guys are really bright. So I'm going to hold in abeyance whether we should, you know, discard most of the history of philosophy in favor of some, you know, very strong contemporary views on what it should be understood with such locutions. Are all beings ultimately one being? Why is there being and not simply non-being? Does all being rest or emerge from being or from non-being? That's an interesting question. If you're a theist, you hold that being comes from being, right? If you're an atheist, you might hold that being comes from non-being. So, of course, the standard cosmological account of the universe is that, 15 billion years ago, it depends, give or take a few billion years, the universe began. It blew up from an infinitely dense point having no extension. So there was nothing, and then there was things. And the fundamental question is, did this explosion from this point actually, did it come from somewhere? The guy in the street would say, well, did God do it? Was there a being that brought being into the universe? Did it brought the universe into being? Or did it just kind of hiccup into being? Right? Some ancient Mesopotamian views held that the universe sort of hiccuped into being. Many very smart people hold that today, but they don't think much about it. They just kind of hold it because that's what a lot of people that are smart say. And then, of course, finally, the next question, is there a God? Now, the question of God is not merely a theological question. Of course, it's a central philosophical question, and I've taught intro to philosophy for many years, and I graduated from that. I didn't teach it anymore, but I always liked to teach it because, of course, it dealt with the big issues. And one of the issues dealt with is there a God? And, of course, teaching philosophy in colleges and universities in the 80s, 90s, and 2000, first decade of the 21st century, most often textbooks dealing with the question of God, they kind of wanted to get the students past that certain question so they could get on with serious work. And then disabuse them that there's a notion of mind as well, right? First you disabuse the students that there's a God, and then you disabuse them that there's a mind. And then you disabuse them that there's anything beyond the material order. And then you disabuse them that, a meaning is the problem, and beauty is the problem, and all these things, and then you let them take other courses. It's a great way to go about these things, right? But anyway, the question, is there a God, is a philosophical question. And it's also a theological question. If so, how is God related to the universe? If God is, what is God's being? And of course, grasping after God's being seems to give quite a different answer, perhaps, than responding to God's being. Right? To grasp after God's being seems to provide a different contour as an answer than responding to God's being. So now if we look at philosophy and theology, philosophy uses autonomous human reason and experience, right, to adjudicate ontological questions. But if you think about this hard enough, and of course Heidegger understood this even while he was writing Simon Sight, that the very asking of an ontological question is itself an event within ontology. Let me repeat that. The very asking of an ontological question is itself an event within ontology. Because the asking of the question of being is itself a type of being. Right? So the question of knowing, the so-called epistemological question, is a question that happens within the field of ontology. See what I'm saying? So the question, the idea that we can autonomously just judge what things are and what things are not seems to come into question by the fact that, when we're doing the judging, we're already being a certain way. So being is presupposed in the very activity by which we judge being. Answering the question of being is an event within the arena of being. Theology, of course, assumes that the answer to the question of being is revealed historically in Jesus the Christ. And the question is the meaning, the question then is, what is the meaning of that which has been revealed? Right? That becomes the fundamental issue. What is the meaning of the answer? Now, of course, this gets a bit confusing because sometimes we use the word natural theology, and of course a natural theologian would just start from the universe and try to reason to God on the basis of order in the universe or some other features of the universe. But the natural theologian, the way I'm talking about the natural theologian, is really a philosopher. Okay? He's a philosopher dealing with the question of God. Not different than a philosopher of religion, really. Are there good reasons that there is a designing a being in the universe? Are there good reasons to believe that there is such a being? Right? Okay. Certainly a philosophical question. Sometimes we might use the word theology to talk about that question. But the way I'm talking about these terms here, theology really is a little bit more narrowly circumscribed as that disciplined response of thinking to the Christ event. Okay, now, both philosophy and theology deal with epistemological questions. The fundamental question since the time of the Enlightenment, unless you forget the Enlightenment was back in the 17th and 18th centuries, the Germans, the Aufklärung, that's when everybody woke up filled with light, right? Looking back at the past and now dare to know, right? Said our good friend Immanuel Kant. Aude sapere, dare to know. So the fundamental question of enlightenment is, what do I know and how do I know that which I know? Or do I really know that which I know? And of course, the very famous thinker, Descartes, very famously argued, let's see, 1650 or so, I believe. Descartes argued that, after all, I'm not sure there's an external world. All I have really immediate contact with is contents of my own mind, right? And so Descartes argued on the basis of that content of the own mind. He finally argued that there was an external world because, of course, God could not be a guy that would systematically deceive all of us. We won't go into that argument here, but Descartes' fundamental question was epistemological. How do I know that there's an external world? And how do I know that there are other beings in that, other minds outside that world? Okay, so epistemology concerns the nature of knowing. What is it to know? And what is the criterion of knowing? And so the question now is the question of epistemology. And of course, both the philosopher and the theologian must deal with this.